Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bell to Bell. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, and we have finally, in all caps, underlined, exclamation points, finally reached Wrestlemania week, and we have plenty to discuss on today's episode. First, we got to look back at that main event of Monday Night Raw, because the question coming out of it is the relationship between the OTC, the original Tribal Chief Roman Reigns, and the Wise Man coming to a close? That's the question that is on everybody's mind. That's the question that we will discuss to lead off today's show. But after that, I have a bone to pick with WWE, because the way that the Smackdown tag team division is being handled for WrestleMania weekend, it irks me. It feels like they deserve much better, and we'll get to why that is later in the show. And we'll close things out with Randy Orton, because although some people might think it's cut and dry who Orton will face on WrestleMania weekend, we don't have an official word. We don't have an official graphic for Randy Orton's WrestleMania match. So is it Solo Sikoa? Is there still a chance that it's Nick Aldis? We'll discuss all of that and more on this episode of Bell to Bell. But before we get started, as always, we like to remind everybody that if you enjoy this content, make sure to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube by searching Nick Belsky, or if you prefer an audio version, you can find us over on Spotify by searching Bell to Bell. Let's kick things off with what we saw last night, at least as of this recording, on Monday Night Raw. Is Roman Reigns done with Paul Heyman? Is the OTC and the Wise Man no longer a duo? No longer a pairing? Is it all over for Reigns and Heyman 1 year after we saw the former induct the latter into the WWE Hall of Fame? Now, let's not look that far back. Let's catch everybody up to the last couple of weeks. The favor is revealed from CM Punk that he wants Paul Heyman to be in his corner. And what we learned yesterday is that since that moment, Roman Reigns has not talked to his Wise Man. Not only that, he leaves Paul Heyman waiting all night. When will Roman show up? Heyman is waiting like a dog waiting for their owner to get home. He is waiting at the entrance to the Golden One Center in Sacramento saying, when, oh, when is my Roman Reigns going to show up? And he doesn't for the longest time. By the time he shows up, who's sitting next to Paul Heyman, consoling him, being a friend, just all in all, being there for Paul Heyman? And I think there might have been some ulterior motives, but at the end of the day, what Roman Reigns sees when he shows up to Golden One Center is the elevator door go up, his car go in, and he looks to his left, and it's Paul Heyman, arm in arm with CM Punk. The first that these two have seen each other since Roman was told that Heyman will be in CM Punk's corner. So Roman's not happy about that. He blows past him on the way to the ring. Even when they get out to the ring, Paul Heyman is following them, saying, okay, I acknowledge my tribal chief is ready so excitedly to hand the microphone to Roman Reigns so they can get back to where they were before. But Roman ignores him, does not acknowledge that Paul Heyman is there, walks past Heyman to pick up a microphone from whoever is ringside, and then says, Sacramento, and turns to Paul Heyman, not looking at him, but with his face directly in front of Heyman, says, acknowledge me. Oh, it's an icy cold start. It is an icy cold start for these two, and what we're being told is the first time that they have even spoke to each other since the favor was announced 2 weeks ago. And the first thing that Roman Reigns has to say to Paul Heyman is why? Why would you betray your tribal chief? Paul Heyman, flummoxed, says, I'm not betraying you. It's a favor owed and a favor given. That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. It's not a betrayal. He's not turning his back on Roman. It's a favor. And Paul Heyman is nothing if not a man of his word. So that's what Heyman's trying to convince Roman Reigns of. But you know who you're trying to convince right now is the man who has been betrayed more than anybody in this industry over the last decade plus. Ever since that chair shot got hit right in the back of Roman Reigns from Seth Rollins 10 plus years ago. He has been the most betrayed person in this entire industry. And Roman doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't want to hear the excuses. He says things like, it feels like the only person getting screwed by this favor is me. And then he follows that up with, tell me, wise man, tell me, how am I supposed to cover the tab for your dumbass favor? He feels like the one person who was by his side, the one person that was loyal to him through all of it. Paul Heyman is now the one that is betraying him heading into the first WrestleMania where he is not the standing champion and not in a title match either in half a decade, when arguably it is the most important time for him to have his wise man. Paul Heyman's not going to be in his corner. In fact, even worse than Paul Heyman not being in his corner, Paul Heyman's going to be in the corner of his opposition in the main event of night one. So Roman Reigns feels betrayed. Roman Reigns feels like Paul Heyman has turned his back on him, just like his family did when Jay and Jimmy Uso separated, just like Sami Zayn did at the Royal Rumble a couple of years ago, just like Seth Rollins did when he broke up the Shield 10 years ago. It feels like it is a repeat of history for Roman Reigns. The people closest to him are turning their back on him when it matters most. And that is why Roman Reigns is done. At least it seems that way, that Roman Reigns is done with Paul Heyman as his wise man. He's not happy. He's not happy at all. In fact, as you saw in the thumbnail, he shoves him into the corner at one point during this entire thing. Face or palm to face, shoving down Paul Heyman, who was helpless in a ring with these behemoths, with these Greek gods. Paul Heyman can't do anything. Paul Heyman can't defend himself. So Roman Reigns is not only done, not only saying, I'm done with you, I'm going to ignore you, but physically assaulting Paul Heyman. It feels like that bridge has burned. Feels like that ship has sailed. At the very least, there's no way these two are going to be on the same page or anywhere close come Saturday night in the main event of night one of WrestleMania. So the question then becomes, what does Paul Heyman do? Because some people might say, well, it's obvious. Now he's just going to go to CM Punk. That's the only other Paul Heyman guy that is in this equation. But there is, of course, the wild card in this entire situation. And you might as well call him that in every situation that he's in at WrestleMania season, because Seth frickin' Rollins is the wild card. Could Paul Heyman side at the end of the night on Saturday night with Seth freaking Rollins? Well, the breadcrumbs are there. Punk has come out to save Paul Heyman on back-to-back occasions. Last Monday, it was from Seth Rollins. This Monday, it's from Roman Reigns. But the problem with this is those heroics, that best friend coming to defend Paul Heyman, it's been a little delayed. Last week, Seth Rollins was trying to find that line. He's pushing him, prodding him, small slaps to the face. It took Seth Rollins shoving Paul Heyman into the corner forcefully with the palm of his hand to the face of Heyman for CM Punk to come out and help him. He let him out there for 5-10 minutes with Seth Rollins before coming out. And it took a physical altercation for Punk to come help Paul Heyman. Same thing this week. It took a physical altercation. It took Paul Heyman being shoved to the ground for the Cult of Personality to hit and CM Punk to hit the ring. So it feels like it's not as cut and dry as, well, CM Punk's his best friend. He's just going to go with CM Punk. And then once again, to close out Monday Night Raw, the final Monday Night Raw before WrestleMania, it's not Seth Rollins staring at CM Punk. No. It's not Seth Rollins staring at Roman Reigns. No. It is Seth Rollins standing tall again with his eyes fixated and locked with Paul Heyman. I don't know what to believe. Because on one hand, Paul Heyman and Seth Rollins, it can't be. But at the other end of this, it makes so much sense. The question that I have then is, this match, as with a handful of the matches this weekend, you can't really get a beat on it. If you think you know who's going to win, you're probably wrong. You have a 33% chance of predicting the correct winner. We'll have to go to Steiner math on that one a little bit, but at the end of the day, nobody can actually say they know who is going to win, except for maybe Triple H. But it can't be Rollins, can it? Seth Rollins has stood tall in every altercation between the three for the past 2 weeks. Roman is all alone for the first time in forever. CM Punk is main eventing WrestleMania for the first time in his career, potentially the only time in his career. So Seth Rollins can't realistically walk away from Saturday with his hand raised, can he? But at the same time, there's no way that Paul Heyman sides with Seth Rollins and then Seth Rollins loses. So the last 2 weeks have thrown a massive wrench into the main event of night one of WrestleMania. And it all hinges upon one person that isn't even in the match. We have 3 of the biggest stars in the industry going head to head to head. And the key piece is Paul Heyman. Because Paul Heyman doesn't side with losers. He doesn't. No matter what you want to say about him, he doesn't side with losers. It feels like the bridge is burned for Roman. Roman doesn't care. Roman's done. Unless this is a ploy, unless this is some really good acting from Roman Reigns. But I saw him in Hobbs and Shaw. I'm not sure how good of an actor he truly is. Although, what he's done in WWE stands for itself. Could go to Punk. It seems too easy, especially for this WrestleMania circuit. It seems too easy that he just says, you know what? I'll just go with CM Punk. But Heyman and Seth Rollins, once something that I wouldn't have even thought to be a result, now something that is coming to the forefront and makes a lot of sense. Like I said, the breadcrumbs are there. So will he side with Rollins? He's not going back with Reigns. It seems like that's done. But what is next for Roman Reigns if that's it? If the tribal chief is no longer in possession of a tribe? Because you could argue Paul Heyman was the last member of Roman Reigns' tribe. Yeah, Jimmy Uso as well, but who knows when he'll be back after the beating he took at the hands of Gunther a couple weeks ago. So what version of tribal chief, Roman Reigns, do we get out of WrestleMania? There have been a couple iterations of Roman Reigns. There's been the big dog. He ain't going back to that. He will never go back to being the big dog. There was the bloodline tribal chief that we saw with the title run for over 1,316 days. And now, from SummerSlam to this very point, we've seen the OTC. But he's still the tribal chief. There's a couple different ways that this could go. There's a couple different ways, at least, that I could see this going. Now, they might go with an option that is completely unbeknownst to me, but the 2 options that I'm looking at, and I don't know which one intrigues me more. You'll have to let me know in the comments. 1, we get the lone wolf. He embraces being all by himself. We get a mixture of the big dog and the tribal chief and the OTC. We get an evolved version of every iteration of Roman Reigns up to this point. We get the lone wolf where he rejects everyone. It's, in a true essence, wreck everyone and leave. That version of Roman Reigns, but not with a wise man, but not with an Uso behind him, but not with Solo Sikoa, just Roman Reigns as the OTC. Everything that he did in that title reign still included in his character, and we get the lone wolf Roman Reigns, because you can't be betrayed if you don't have anybody to trust, right? If there's nobody there to betray you, then you won't get betrayed. So maybe we see the lone wolf Roman Reigns, or maybe, just maybe, with no one to turn to, Roman Reigns turns back to family. And what family does he have right now? Jey Uso has his own problems. Those two feel very separated at this moment. Jimmy Uso, who knows where he's at? Sure as heck isn't going to go to Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, and the new bloodline. So what family is left for Roman Reigns? Final boss. The final boss's absence since Elimination Chamber looms very large. It's almost deafening in the silence from The Rock. The first we heard of him in this entire WrestleMania build was an Instagram video where he said, it's not one day, it's day one of something that he's always wanted to do, but he hasn't gotten to do yet. And since then, all he's done is show up, offer Cody a golden ticket, get turned down, and turn Cena heel. Now, here's the thing. John Cena and Cody Rhodes, they didn't need The Rock to be there every other night to help build this WrestleMania match between those two, because it's John Cena in his last WrestleMania, and it is the current face of the company in Cody Rhodes, or at least 1B to Roman Reigns. But the absence is still something that is sparking the imagination. And it's something that whenever Roman Reigns is stripped away from everybody else that he calls a friend, everybody else that he trusts, everybody else that he believes was loyal to him, maybe does force him to sell his soul to The Rock. And all of a sudden, you have a stable led by the final boss, The Rock, and flanked by John Cena and Roman Reigns, who are on the same side. I don't know which one's more exciting to me. I don't know which one's more likely. I feel like I lean towards Lone Wolf Roman Reigns. But man, the possibilities are endless as we have now officially stripped away the wise man from the OTC. It was a very interesting segment on Monday Night Raw. It was a very interesting main event. And boy, am I excited to see how this plays out on Saturday night at WrestleMania. Speaking of WrestleMania, let's talk a little bit about the tag team division in WWE as a whole, because when I look at the card for Sunday's WrestleMania, there is one glaring issue that I have. And it's not that we have the New Day versus the War Raiders, because I think that match should be on the WrestleMania card, but not instead of the WWE tag team titles. I think the WWE tag team titles deserved better. As of right now, the plan, at least as we know it, is Street Profits versus the Motor City Machine Guns on the Friday night SmackDown before WrestleMania. That taking place at T-Mobile Arena to kick off the weekend. And don't get me wrong, that should be a great match. The Street Profits are on an absolute tear right now. The Motor City Machine Guns have been entertaining since they stepped foot in WWE, so I'm sure that match will go off very well. What I will say about that match is there cannot, and I cannot emphasize this enough, if it's going to be on the Friday night SmackDown before Mania, there cannot be any interference. The only way that I am okay with there being interference in this matchup, in this title match, is if it leads to what we've all expected there to be, which was a multi-team ladder match on one of Saturday or Sunday. That's the only way I would be okay with there being interference in this match. But at the same time, if there isn't any interference, it wouldn't make any sense. All 5 of these teams on the SmackDown tag team division have been intertwined and interfering in each other's matches for months leading up to WrestleMania 41. Is DIY just going to chill and be like, yeah, that's fine. That's how the titles are going to be defended, and we're not going to be involved at all on WrestleMania weekend. We might as well not even show up, or we'll just sit in catering. No, it wouldn't make any sense. Would Pretty Deadly and Los Garza just chill in the back and say, you know what? We've been fighting really hard for TV time, and we've done really good with the time we've been given, but it's all right. You know, maybe post-WrestleMania, when a lot of the general eyes aren't on the sport as much, that's when we'll try to shine, and maybe we'll get them next year. No, it wouldn't make sense. Even Miz and Hayes, I know that's a very new combination, but you're telling me the Miz isn't going to be involved at anything this weekend? You're telling me Carmelo Hayes, who not 9 months ago was the first overall pick in the WWE draft to SmackDown, he's not going to be involved in WrestleMania? I mean, that's a gross misjustice there. So it wouldn't make any sense for there not to be interference. But with this matchup, with this title, they need, especially because they've run out of time, they need, if it's just going to be straight up Profits versus Guns, if that's the WrestleMania weekend matchup, There needs to not be interference. That needs to just be a matchup that showcases both of these teams for what they are, which is two of the top tag teams under the main question, which is, why are these titles relegated to the Smackdown before Mania to begin with? The World Tag Team Championships over on Monday Night Raw have not had nearly the same amount of steam as these WWE Tag Team Championships. Now, again, I am not trying to take a shot at the War Raiders, because every single time the War Raiders get in that ring and defend those titles, I'm entertained. I've loved all the work that they've done, and in the short period of time, I've liked this matchup between War Raiders and the heel version of the New Day. Specifically, you look at these two teams and what they've done leading into this WrestleMania match. The War Raiders have 2 title defenses in 5 months since they won back in, November, December? Meanwhile, the New Day, their first feud after excommunicating Big E, was feuding with LWO because, Rey Mysterio kicked him out of the locker room and they took umbrage with that. Okay. But they really didn't face Rey. Yeah, they injured Rey. There was one singles match with Rey. But most of the time, it was them versus a combination of Dragon Lee, Cruz del Toro, or Joaquin. Was it Joaquin Wilde? I believe it's Joaquin Wilde. But here's the thing. The latter two there, Cruz and Joaquin, they haven't won a match in over 9 months. I keep track of these things because I'm a nerd. I like spreadsheets. So every Monday, every Friday, I go down through, I keep track of who wins, who loses, and I give them a record. I started doing that in July of last year. And in that time, Cruz and Joaquin are 0-4, which means not only have they not won, but they have barely even wrestled on TV. And that was who New Day just got finished up feuding with. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, them versus War Raiders gets a spot on WrestleMania. Meanwhile, this SmackDown tag division, which has been heating up since late last year with all 5 of these teams, that's not deserving of a spot, especially in a ladder match. We don't have a ladder match going into WrestleMania for the first time in Lord knows how long. That division deserves to be showcased. Again, not saying that the Raw tag team titles don't. The world titles on Raw, yeah, I like War Raiders versus New Day. It should be on the card. But you should also add another one to the card, and that should be a 6-team ladder match, giving these teams an opportunity to get the payoff that it deserves of all the work that they've done leading into WrestleMania. I don't know. Maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance and they still end up with that 6-team ladder match. Maybe there is interference and that's the way that we get into the 6-team ladder match. I mean, it's not the only match that we're expecting on Mania that hasn't been made official just yet. So maybe we do get that. But man, even though both should be on the card, if WWE was to only choose one, it should have been the SmackDown tag division that got that spotlight. It just should have been. We'll see. Let's close out this episode with a discussion on Randy Orton, because obviously the WrestleMania plans have been thrown in through a complete loop due to the injury to Kevin Owens, which of course we obviously all wish Kevin Owens a speedy recovery. That is a scary injury, and we're hoping to get to see him again because he was doing some of the best work of his entire career at WWE to this point over the last handful of months, and it sucks that he wasn't able to capitalize on that momentum. But what that leaves is Randy Orton without a WrestleMania opponent. And the question now is between two people. Will it be Solo Sikoa or will it be SmackDown General Manager Nick Aldis? I know which one I want to see. And again, it's just personal preference, but I want to see Aldis versus Randy Orton. I just do. And there's a chance that we do get that. I understand that the overwhelming likelihood points in favor of it being Randy versus Solo. They do have that history because post-Mania last year when Solo Sikoa started taking over as the new tribal chief, it was Randy Orton and Kevin Owens that 9 out of 10 times were going up against Solo in that new bloodline. But last Friday, Solo Sikoa stepped up. He interfered. He stepped in to a very tense discussion between Randy Orton and Nick Aldis. And everybody said, oh, there it is. It's Solo Sikoa. They're going to give him the opportunity. It's going to be Solo and Randy. End of story. We had a little bit of tension with Aldis and Randy, but you know what? We're not going to go after that. Aldis hasn't wrestled in Lord knows how long. Short notice. Is he even going to be ready to wrestle? All of that stuff. But at some point, we're going to need that. They're telling too good of a story to not pay off with a matchup between Randy Orton and Nick Aldis. And while a lot of the card has been officially announced for WrestleMania, this one hasn't been. Monday night, right before that final segment on Raw, they went through the entire card for Saturday and for Sunday, which, by the way, one theme song for Saturday, one theme song for Sunday, different graphics for Saturday and Sunday. I'm liking the vibe. That's just a small thing, but I like it anyway. But the one match that was mysteriously not on there was Randy Orton and Solo Sikoa. Maybe it's a last-minute ad. I mean, Orton is going to be on the card. Randy Orton is going to have a match at WrestleMania. This, I believe, being his 20th match or 20th WrestleMania, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I do like the fact that if this is where they end up going with Nick Aldis and Randy Orton, that Aldis doesn't jump in right away. You know, I thought, maybe my emotions got the best of me, but I thought right after Aldis was RKO'd by Orton, I was like, oh, it's on. Nick Aldis has had enough. WrestleMania, his tension is high, his anxiety is high, trying to keep everybody in their place. And the last thing he needed was Randy Orton to just RKO him for pretty much no reason. I mean, what reason does Randy Orton have for going after Aldis? It's not like Aldis broke Kevin Owens' neck and cost him the match at Mania. So Nick Aldis, being a GM first, doing his job, wouldn't immediately step in and say, you know what? I want you. It's me and you. We're going head to head. And something could happen to Solo Sikoa on Friday night that forces Aldis's hand and says, I have no other choice, Randy. You want a Mania match? You got it, but it's going to be against me. And we end up, maybe it's an Orton punt. We've been kind of alluding to the fact that Orton is starting to hear voices again. He's starting to lose it a little bit, and maybe that explains randomly RKOing Nick Aldis for the second time since returning to WWE, but something happens to Solo. There's still a chance for Nick Aldis to step in and face Randy Orton. Either way, I think we know Randy Orton's winning. We will have an official predictions episode coming out with a guest as well later this week. But something tells me no matter whether it's Nick Aldis or Solo Sikoa, it's going to be Randy Orton that gets his hand raised on, I would imagine it's Sunday. Right now we have 7 matches that are slated for Saturday, 6 that are slated for Sunday. You'd have to imagine Randy Orton versus whoever slots in on the Sunday card. But that leads me to my last point here. And that is, if we end up with Aldis versus Orton, which is what I want to see, man, that is a weird spot for Solo Sikoa. It really is. It feels like WWE has completely dropped the ball on Solo Sikoa in 2025. He kicked off the year losing to Roman Reigns on the Raw on Netflix debut. It was the first match ever on Raw on Netflix, was Roman Reigns versus Solo Sikoa for the Ula Fala. Solo loses it. And now the question becomes, all right, how do we follow this up? What's next for Solo? Because that is the very end of this storyline that he began right after WrestleMania last year. So what happens next for Solo? Nothing. That ended up being the answer. Absolutely nothing. He disappears for weeks. When he does show up, he shows up with his tail between his legs, like he was a dog that got kicked. And all of a sudden, he comes back as Jacob's number 2. Now, that's eventually going to build to a conflict and end up resulting in a match. But when is that? Are we going to draw that out to SummerSlam? And if that's the case, man, that is such a far fall for Solo Sikoa, who was booked as the main event match of SummerSlam of last year. To go from that to maybe being a backup plan for a Randy Orton match at Mania, where he could potentially lose out on that spot to the SmackDown general manager who has not wrestled in WWE, at least not for a very long time. That is such a far fall for Solo Sikoa. Now, here's the thing. when everybody looks back at his run as the new tribal chief or the tribal chief to the Bloodline 2.0, a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people were not entertained. And I thought early on it was a little rough. It was a slow start. And part of the excitement early on was, well, what's going to happen with Roman Reigns when he comes back? When is Roman Reigns going to come back? And look at all these new faces. Tama Tonga's debuting. Tonga Loa's debuting. Then eventually Jacob Fatu debuts. And you're saying, oh, this is all exciting. And then it kind of hit a lull. And it got to the point where he was probably prematurely placed in the main event of SummerSlam against Cody Rhodes. That entire situation just didn't work. And then post, he just didn't have the star power to go head to head with Roman Reigns. And it was not believable that Solo Sikoa and his new bloodline was going to be able to hold off Roman Reigns and eventually Jimmy and Jey Uso and Sami Zayn as they all came back together before the War Games match. So it was not, at the end of the day, I think, as successful as WWE would have hoped it to be. I think they wanted this to be a star-making storyline for Solo Sikoa, and it just fell flat. But man, to go from that, putting him in those positions, to not even having him on the card at WrestleMania, it's going to put a huge emphasis on what they do with him post-Mania. What that program looks like between him and Jacob Fatu is going to have a lot of an indication on whether or not Solo Sikoa continues his fall to the bottom of the card, or if he can sustain and become an upper middle card guy, which is, I think, what his current ceiling would be. But man, it was just too many losses during the tribal chief reign. It was really just wins in tag team matches. He never really won in one-on-one matches. And the poison pill was Jacob Fatu. He was just too good, too fast. He was too blockbuster, too fast. He was too big of a star, too fast, to where it wasn't believable that Jacob Fatu was a number 2 in any stable whatsoever. Jacob Fatu is a star, and that's what I don't think WWE counted on. They didn't expect Fatu to come in and immediately be one of the most exciting wrestlers that they have to offer on any show. And that's just what happened. And it overshadowed Solo. But if you look at some of his work, maybe not the overarching stuff, maybe not the big matches, and that's another reason that people don't like it. But once Solo started to get comfortable, once he started letting some of that goofiness out, I thought his run was a lot better. And I think that's what he needs to tap into. When Solo Sikoa tries to be overly serious, he's boring. Because he's not as intimidating in ring as somebody like Jacob Fatu is. Jacob Fatu can be overly serious, which he never is. And you'd believe it. If Fatu was stoic, you'd believe that he is still a serious threat. When Solo is stoic, you just don't believe it enough. So I think you have to do exactly what they're doing with Jacob. I mean, the roadmap is there. Let them be themselves. Jacob as himself is a star. Solo as himself, we saw it time and time again. Whenever he was laughing, joking, being kind of pompous, that was the best version. You got to let him do it. But man, it's kind of starting from the ground up for Solo Sikoa. Somebody who, through 2024, the company put a lot of weight behind, and it has not translated to results in 2025. The payoff just wasn't there. So we'll see if he ends up getting the matchup against Randy Orton. If he does, I'll be interested in it. I'm not going to say it's one of my most, intriguing matches of WrestleMania weekend, but I'll be interested in it. I'd be far more interested in Nick Aldis versus Randy Orton, something that we have not seen before. A storyline that is really entertaining the last 2 weeks on SmackDown, and something that I'd love to see a quick payoff with. It doesn't have to be a long-term storyline, or maybe because WWE likes this kind of stuff, maybe it is a long-term storyline, but feels like something that's been at least bubbling under the surface here for a little while, and a payoff on WrestleMania Sunday wouldn't be the worst thing. But either way, we finally made it to WrestleMania week, which means we are not done after this episode. We will have a bonus predictions episode coming out tomorrow on Thursday. And then, of course, we'll have a recap of WrestleMania for you Monday morning, not to mention after that, a full episode on Wednesday as we typically do. But we got a lot of content coming for you from Bell to Bell and Nick Belsky on YouTube. But if you enjoyed this content, make sure that you like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends, all that fun stuff. And you can find us on YouTube at Nick Belsky, or if you'd rather an audio platform, you can find us on Spotify by searching Bell to Bell. That's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.